I never imagined it would end like this. 17 years. 17 years I'd poured my sweat, my ideas, my life into Omnitech. And then, gone. Not with a respectful handshake or even a forced, awkward cake in the break room. No, I was erased. An email notification, cold and impersonal. My access card, suddenly dead plastic in my hand. And then, the final humiliation. Security escorting me out like I'd been caught stuffing company laptops into my bag. 17 years of loyalty, innovation, late nights fueled by stale coffee and sheer willpower, all invalidated. All because of a trap. A meticulously crafted snare laid by someone I'd called my friend. My work confidant, Amanda. But Amanda made one critical mistake. She underestimated me. She saw the friendly lunch companion. The shoulder she cried on during her breakups. The woman who opened her home for Thanksgiving when Amanda had nowhere else to go. She didn't see the steel beneath. She didn't know I wasn't the type to go down without a fight. And she certainly didn't know I had recorded everything. Omnitech, based in the sprawling tech corridor just outside Denver, Colorado. The air always smelled faintly of ozone and ambition. I was a technical project manager, navigating the chaotic, high-pressure world of software development cycles and client demands. It was stressful, sure, but I thrived on it. Building something from scratch, leading a team, seeing a complex project through to completion, that was my jam. For the last 5 years, Amanda had been my right hand. Or so I thought. She was almost a decade younger. Whip smart. With an easy charm that could disarm even the grumpiest engineer. We clicked instantly, our work styles complementing each other. She was ambitious, yes, but I saw it as drive. Something I respected. Our connection quickly spilled beyond project deadlines and status meetings. Lunches became a regular thing. Sushi platters devoured over shared frustrations about impossible deadlines and gossip about office romances. I learned about her family back east. Her dreams of climbing the corporate ladder. Her string of disastrous dates. I shared my own life, my teenager's latest dramas. My husband's obsession with restoring a vintage Mustang. My secret desire to one day open a small bakery. When Thanksgiving rolled around 1 year and she mentioned sadly that she couldn't afford the flight home and had no local plans, I didn't hesitate. Come to our place, I'd said, picturing her alone in her small apartment. She'd beamed, thanking me profusely. At my crowded, noisy family dinner, she charmed everyone, laughing easily, helping clear plates, playing board games with my kids. She fit right in. Friend, I thought. Definitely a friend. But somewhere along the line, the currents shifted, so subtly at first, I almost didn't notice. Like the tide turning far out at sea. The change was imperceptible until suddenly, you realize the water's edge is creeping closer. It started with questions, innocent enough, seemingly. Hey Angela. Can you remind me where that master client file is stored again? Just in case you're ever out sick. She'd ask, flashing that bright smile. Then it was about internal passwords. Project access levels. Just trying to be proactive. You know? Make sure the team's covered if you take that vacation you deserve. She'd explain smoothly. I'd given her some access. Trusting her intentions. Thinking it was proactive. How naive I'd been. Then I noticed her spending more time hovering near Rick's office. Rick Tanaka, our department head, a man perpetually stressed, easily flattered, and notoriously susceptible to office politics. Amanda started bringing him coffee, laughing a little too loudly at his not-so-funny jokes, offering to take on extra tasks that put her directly in his line of sight. Again, I brushed it off initially. Networking, I told myself. Good for her. But the pattern became undeniable. Suddenly, crucial update meetings were happening, and my invitation seemed to get lost in the email shuffle. Decisions were being made about projects I was leading, and I was finding out after the fact, often from Amanda herself, delivered with a sympathetic frown. "Oh, didn't Rick tell you? Yeah, we had a quick huddle this morning. Decided to go with Plan B, don't worry." I took detailed notes, she'd say, already positioning herself as the indispensable conduit of information. A knot of unease began to tighten in my stomach. This wasn't networking, this felt like maneuvering. Then came the email, forwarded to the CEO, the COO, and half the executive board. Subject line: Urgent. Project Nightingale data breach, a Miller oversight. A. Miller. Me. Attached was a project file. Corrupted. Altered. It contained fabricated data points. Wildly inaccurate projections that made it look like my team had not only failed spectacularly but had actively tried to cover it up, costing our biggest client a fortune in projected losses. My blood ran cold. I stared at the screen. The email address clearly showing my name as the sender. But I hadn't sent it. I knew I hadn't. I'd never seen that version of the file. It was a fabrication, a grotesque distortion of our team's work. But the timestamp, the sender address, it all pointed directly, unequivocally, at me. The trap had been sprung. Rick's summons came via a curt instant message: my office. Now, no pleasantries. The knot in my stomach turned into a lead weight. His office felt colder than usual. The blinds drawn against the afternoon sun, casting long shadows across the room. Rick sat behind his large oak desk, his face an unreadable mask, hands steepled in front of him. A thick file lay ominously on the desk blotter. "Angela," he began, his voice flat, devoid of its usual forced bonhomie. "How long have you been with Omnitech?" 17 years, Rick, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. He tapped the file. 17 years. And you expect us to believe, what exactly? That this. He gestured vaguely towards the file, presumably containing the damning email, just materialized out of thin air? That someone, somehow, framed you using your own account, with data points only a project lead would have access to? His tone dripped with skepticism. The evidence here is pretty compelling. Angela. Rick. I didn't send that email. I insisted, leaning forward slightly. That file has been altered. Someone must have accessed my workstation. Or maybe there's a server glitch. My mind raced, grasping for explanations, for possibilities. He cut me off with a dismissive wave of his hand. We've had IT look into it. No glitches reported. Your workstation logs show activity consistent with sending the email at that time. Of course they did. Whoever did this was thorough. And then I saw her, sitting quietly in the corner chair, almost blending into the shadows, Amanda. Her expression was a carefully crafted mask of concern and pity. She met my eyes briefly, then looked down, shaking her head slightly, as if pained by the whole situation. The sight of her feigned sympathy sent a jolt of cold fury through me. She did this. I knew it, deep in my gut. I swear. Rick, I'm being set up, I pleaded, my voice rising slightly despite my efforts to stay calm. Angela, Rick said, his voice hardening, given the severity of the potential client impact and the evidence presented. I have no choice. You're suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation. Suspended. The word hung in the air like poison gas. 17 years. Reduced to a security risk. As I numbly gathered my purse, avoiding Amanda's sickeningly sympathetic gaze, I felt a strange calm descend. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The drive home was a blur of humiliation and simmering rage. Walking through my front door, the scent of coffee and the familiar clutter of family life felt alien. Like stepping onto a movie set of a life I no longer inhabited. My husband tried to comfort me. My kids looked confused, but I couldn't process anything beyond the burning injustice. But wallowing wasn't my style. After a sleepless night fueled by anger and caffeine, I turned my living room into a war room. I wasn't just suspended, I was accused. My reputation, my career, my livelihood were on the line. I had to fight back. I started digging, systematically, methodically. My tech background was my shield and my sword. I remotely accessed archived server logs, poring over lines of code, looking for anomalies, anything out of place around the time the malicious email was sent. I cross-referenced login times, VPN access records, anything that might contradict the official story. It was painstaking, like searching for a single grain of sand on a vast beach. I reviewed security footage access logs for the office floor. Who was near my workstation when I wasn't there? The cameras themselves didn't cover the desks directly, but the hallway logs showed Amanda lingering near my area during lunch breaks more often than usual in the weeks leading up to the incident. Circumstantial, but noted. Then I remembered my habit, the one born from managing chaotic projects with rapid-fire decisions. I often recorded meetings on my phone. Just audio, for my own reference, to make sure I didn't miss details when writing up minutes later. I scrolled back through months of recordings, labeling them by date and meeting topic. And then I found it. A recording from about 2 months prior. A casual chat with Amanda in one of the small, supposedly soundproof focus rooms. We were discussing a potential team restructuring. The audio was clear, my voice, then hers, laced with that familiar, slightly too sweet tone. It's just, Rick really seems to value my input lately. Amanda's voice chirped from my phone's speaker. Imagine if I were leading the Nightingale project. We could really streamline things. My recorded voice replied, something non-committal about teamwork. Then Amanda laughed. A sharp, ambitious sound. Yeah, well, if I were running the show, things would be different, smoother, more efficient. It'd be great to finally get that team-led spot. Too bad Angela's still holding onto it. Too bad Angela's still holding onto it. The words hung in the air. At the time, I'd probably dismissed it as idle ambition. Maybe even a slightly awkward compliment about my position. Listening now, with the sting of betrayal fresh, it sounded chillingly premeditated. A motive, clear as day, captured in her own voice. I saved the file, backing it up multiple times. It was a start, but it wasn't definitive proof of how she framed me. I needed more. Passive defense wasn't enough. I needed concrete evidence linking Amanda directly to the fabricated email. I called in a favor from an old college friend, Mark, now a cybersecurity wizard working for a private firm. I explained the situation, the suspicious email, my suspension. Send me the header info from the forwarded email. If you can get it, Mark said, his voice all business. And anything else you have. Let me see what I can dig up about the metadata. Getting the full header wasn't easy, but I managed to persuade a sympathetic junior IT guy, who always remembered I brought donuts on Fridays, to discreetly pull the raw source of the forwarded message. I sent it straight to Mark. A day later, he called back. Bingo, Angela, he said, a note of triumph in his voice. The email originated from within Omnitech's network. All right, but the originating IP address? It doesn't resolve to your assigned workstation ID. It traces back to a different node, one frequently used by, wait for it, Amanda Riley. My heart leapt. This was it. Hard proof. She hadn't used my machine directly, she'd likely used her own or another terminal and spoofed the sender address. A rookie mistake for someone trying to be clever. Leaving behind a digital fingerprint. But I still needed something visual. Something undeniable. An idea sparked. Audacious and risky. I still technically had access to the building until my official termination. Under the guise of packing personal belongings, I bought the smallest, highest resolution spy camera I could find online, the kind that looks like a USB drive. The next day, heart pounding, I went back to the office. The walk down the familiar hallway felt like traversing enemy territory. I kept my head down, avoiding eye contact. Amanda was at her desk, looking busy, offering me another one of those pitying smiles that made my skin crawl. I ignored her. In my old office, surrounded by boxes, I pretended to pack. My hands trembled slightly as I discreetly positioned the camera behind a stack of technical manuals on the bookshelf. Angled perfectly towards the guest chair and the old, decommissioned workstation I hadn't cleared out yet. I enabled motion detection and remote viewing. Then I waited. For 2 agonizing days, I obsessively checked the camera feed from home. Nothing but cleaning crews and the occasional colleague retrieving a forgotten item. Then, on the 3rd afternoon, payoff. The feed flickered to life. Amanda. She slipped into my old office, glancing nervously down the hall before closing the door partway. She went straight to the old workstation, powered it up, and inserted a USB drive. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but it clearly showed her navigating file directories containing archived versions of my past projects, and copying files onto her drive. Why would she need those files now? Unless she was looking for more material or trying to cover her tracks? I had it. The audio recording establishing motive. The IP trace proving the email didn't come from my machine. And now, video evidence of her accessing my old workstation and files without authorization after I was suspended. The trifecta. With trembling but determined hands, I compiled everything. Mark's cybersecurity report detailing the IP trace. The audio file timestamped and transcribed. The video footage clipped to the relevant moments. And a detailed, point-by-point rebuttal of the accusations against me, outlining Amanda's actions and motives. I submitted the entire package directly to the head of Human Resources and Omnitech's internal legal counsel. Then, I waited again, the silence stretching taut. The call came less than a week later. It wasn't Rick. It was Eleanor Vance, the formidable head of our. Her tone was crisp, professional, but underscored with a hint of apology. "Angela, we've reviewed the materials you submitted," she began, "and we've conducted our own follow-up investigation based on your evidence." A pause. "Amanda Riley has been placed on administrative leave. Effective immediately." Relief washed over me, so potent it almost brought me to my knees. They believed me. The evidence was undeniable. Eleanor continued, detailing the findings of their internal probe. They'd confirmed the IP address belonged to Amanda's usual workstation cluster. They'd cross-referenced building access logs with the timestamp on the video footage I provided. Confronted with the evidence, the IP trace, the audio recording, the video, Amanda's story apparently crumbled. She confessed to accessing my accounts, fabricating the email, and attempting to usurp my position. Amanda was fired, swiftly and without ceremony. Justice, it seemed, could be efficient when properly motivated. But for me, it wasn't quite over. My name had been dragged through the mud. My 17 years of service had been tarnished by a false accusation. A simple reinstatement wasn't enough. I needed to reclaim my professional honor. Publicly and unequivocally, I contacted an employment lawyer. We filed a formal complaint with the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, alleging wrongful suspension based on fabricated evidence and defamation. We demanded not only reinstatement, which the company quickly offered, but also compensation for damages to my reputation and emotional distress. Omnitech, facing irrefutable proof of their mismanagement and Amanda's malicious actions, chose to settle rather than face a public hearing. The settlement included a significant financial component and, more importantly to me, a formal, written apology from the company acknowledging the false accusations and clearing my name completely. I had won. About a month after the settlement, I received an unexpected invitation from Omnitech. Not an offer to return to my old job, I'd already decided against that. Needing a fresh start, but an invitation to speak. They were holding a mandatory company-wide seminar on workplace ethics and data security, and Eleanor Vance herself asked if I would be willing to share my experience, anonymizing Amanda. Of course, as a case study. Walking back into that building felt different. I wasn't the humiliated employee escorted out by security anymore. I held my head high, dressed in a power suit that felt like armor. As I stood at the podium in the main conference hall, looking out at the sea of familiar and unfamiliar faces, I saw Rick in the front row. He wouldn't meet my eyes, a flush creeping up his neck. I offered a small, tight smile, not cruel, but definitely not forgiving. A smile that said, "You messed up. You let this happen, and I'm stronger for it." I was no longer the easygoing colleague they could manipulate. I was a survivor, a warrior. I don't share this story to dwell on the bitterness or the pain, though both were undeniably real. I share it for anyone else who has ever felt the sting of betrayal in the place they dedicated their professional lives. For anyone who's been undermined, sabotaged, or thrown under the bus by a colleague they trusted. Know this: you are not alone. And you are not powerless. If you find yourself in that nightmare scenario, breathe, stay calm, don't react impulsively. Instead, channel that anger, that hurt, into action. Observe, document everything: emails, conversations, check your local laws on recording. But notes are always good. Strange occurrences, inconsistencies, gather your evidence. Piece by piece, trust your instincts, but rely on facts. Truth has a stubborn way of clawing its way to the surface. Especially when you give it a helping hand. It might take time. It will definitely take courage. But it can emerge. Yes, I lost my job, for a time. I lost faith in someone I considered a friend. But in the process, I found something far more valuable: my own resilience. I reclaimed my reputation, my confidence, and the unshakable knowledge that no one gets to define my worth or discard my contributions. No one can trample you if you refuse to stay down. My fight wasn't just about getting justice for myself, it was about proving that integrity matters. That truth prevails, and that even in the cutthroat world of corporate ladders, you can stand firm without losing yourself. If this story resonated with you, or if you've faced your own workplace battles, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming adversity and maybe even a little sweet revenge. Thanks for listening.